All right, welcome everybody to episode 2 of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Hope everybody is doing well this afternoon. I'm going to take just a few seconds to let some people trickle in here to the live stream. Certainly make yourself known in the chat if you're in here watching us live here on Wednesday evening. Just posted the stream over on Twitter as well. I'm a little bit better at this the second time around than I was the first time. I've done these live streams before on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel last season. Did a couple live shows. Um, and admittedly, last Wednesday when I did the first episode of All Fired Up here, I was I came in more unprepared than I normally am for almost anything. I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing. I felt like I knew how to get everything set up, and then it was like 12:33, and I was scrambling to get the stream up. I didn't I didn't type my tweet out ahead of time announcing that it was live, so I had to do that while trying to talk. I probably sounded like an idiot for the first 30 seconds or so of the show, and maybe you're saying you still do. I have no idea, but I think everything went much smoother for episode 2 than it did episode 1 of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show channel. First and foremost, housekeeping. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel to make sure that you can see all of these All Fired Up episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. That's a great way to make sure you don't miss any of my content throughout the college basketball season. If you are not a Kentucky fan, you'll have to put up with everything skewing towards some Wildcats talk throughout the college basketball season, but certainly doing a lot of national coverage this year as well. So I think you'll enjoy following there at BRamseyKSR. All my written work is on KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. And then you can also find the YouTube channel or the podcast, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast. Thank you, Darkness, for joining in and watching this afternoon. So today, as we get into these All Fired Up episodes, my plan is to pick one or two topics across the college basketball scene and sort of dive into them, kind of drill in a little bit deeper, and then certainly, interact with the chat, interact with some Twitter followers, and answer some questions as well. Today, though, being Wednesday the 15th, seemed pertinent to talk about last night's Champions Classic. This is, I think, was this year 13 maybe of the Champions Classic? I think it began maybe 2012 or so. But recently, this event has not been kind to Kentucky. We will touch on that a little bit more later, but we might as well start with the first game of the night, which was Duke and Michigan State. This game, probably the build up to this game was a little bit different, probably than what some people expected, or at least what the people running the Champions Classic maybe expected. Duke losing to Arizona, albeit though it was at Cameron Indoor Stadium. It's not shocking that Duke lost to Arizona. That's another top 10, now top 5 team in the country. And it looks like, Coach Tommy Lloyd's team is really, really good this year and deserving of that top 5, top 10 ranking. But Duke comes in off of a loss, and then Michigan State, while they had bounced back and got a win before the Champions Classic against Southern Indiana, they had lost on opening night to James Madison. And, one of the biggest upsets certainly of the season so far. So you had two teams that had already suffered a loss, and that kind of turned us into almost a bigger game than it would have been otherwise, because these are teams that are trying to get a quality win on their non-conference resume early in the season. And it was the Blue Devils who, it was a slow start both ways. Oh my goodness. Everybody's kind of sitting down. I always say, to me, the Champions Classic is kind of the de facto start to the college basketball season for a lot of folks. Admittedly, and this is what we talked about last week on All Fired Up, is that, that first week of the college basketball season is not the most exciting. There's certainly good games here and there for, true college basketball sickos like myself, or probably anybody listening to this. We'll watch any game. I was, even while Duke and Michigan State was going on last night, I was locked in to Wright State Toledo game, and it's not even a game I bet on. So, I was enjoying watching that as much as anything else. But the Champions Classic's, a night where we can sit down and, everybody knows I'm getting 2 really high-quality games. Plus, last night we had Marquette and Illinois and a few other really high-level matchups. So last night was a very, very good night of college basketball across the slate, and people are really starting to get into it. And the Blue Devils looked the part last night, I thought. Now, yes, it was a disappointing start for fans of just clean basketball. I mean, this was a rock fight. I mean, it was almost the 10-minute mark, and it was still 9-9. And I think there had been more. I think there were 10 combined turnovers. Each team had 9 points, and we were like 9 minutes into the game. So that's not a very, the things aren't looking too great at that point. But everybody sort of settled in, and then once they settled in, Duke went on their run early and kind of, not necessarily ran away with it because Michigan State made it a little bit of a game late. But I never really felt like Michigan State was in contention to win the game after that run that Duke made about midway through the first half to start to pull away. Certainly the story of this game was the freshman off the bench, Caleb Foster, for the Blue Devils. I believe he was 4 for 5 from 3, had a game high 18 points. But then on the other side of things, like I'm disappointed in this Duke backcourt so far this season. A lot was made about Tyrese Proctor this season. Heck, some people had him as a preseason All-American. I never really bought into that. I'm not a big person of projecting these massive year-to-year jumps. Same thing with Donovan Clingan to some extent at UConn now. His is maybe even a little bit more proven because he did what he did last year on such a small sample size. But Tyrese Proctor is a very good player. He's going to have a great season and a great career. But I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves in the offseason, projecting him as a potential All-American. Jeremy Roach, we kind of know what he is, but he hasn't played great so far this season. He had 4 turnovers last night. That was a little disappointing to see. You got nothing out of Jared McCain last night. He played 16 minutes and was 0 for 4 from 3. But as I said, Caleb Foster came in and sort of saved the day for the Blue Devils, gave them a scoring punch off of the bench, certainly a shooting punch. Like I said, 4 for 5 for 3, 18 points for the freshman. Then Kyle Filipowski filled in 15 points and 8 rebounds as well. I thought he was going to be the story of the game because I didn't think that Matty Sissoko and the Spartans front court would really be any answer for him. And much like it was for everybody, it was a little bit of a slow start for Kyle Filipowski, but man, I love watching him play at his size, 7 foot, 7'1", whatever he is. Like, his footwork is phenomenal. He had one move on the block that he finished with his left hand over his right shoulder where, his feet just moved so quick. It's like, I have no idea how you guard that at his size. On the Spartan side of things, like, the hot take is, do we start panicking yet? And I'm a big proponent. If you follow me on Twitter or know me personally or anything, like I'm always pump the brakes. It's November 15th, or last night it was November 14th. Let's not freak out about how everything's going. It's a little ironic that I'm saying that on a podcast called All Fired Up, where I'm trying to get all fired up about some topics. But when it comes to November basketball, I honestly try to not be all fired up because to me, you have to get into the course of the season. What you do in February and March is obviously more important than what you're doing now. But I do think there have to be some alarm bells ringing for Coach Tom Izzo and Spartans fans because it hasn't looked good. Like the results are what they are. And especially at this point of the season, James Madison is legitimately really good. I've talked about them being the FAU of this team. I think that's becoming more and more of an apt comparison. They're now ranked 24th, I believe, that this week in the AP poll, and very deservedly so. And then losing to Duke on a neutral floor, that's certainly that's nothing to worry about in a vacuum. But you do start to worry again, as I said, about how things look. AJ Hoggard, like what's the deal here? This is a guy that's a senior now, has played for Coach Tom Izzo for 4 years, and he's yet to reach double figures this season. He has 6 turnovers in 3 games, 2 of those games being against lesser competition than Duke, and he was 1 for 8 last night from the floor. If I could do some quick math, he's 0 for 7 from 3 on the season. He's 5 for 19. He's 5 for 19 from 2. Like, this is a guy that you were counting on being a potential all Big Ten sort of guard, and right now he's looking like a guy that you're really have a hard time playing almost. Like, I'm almost starting to wonder when do we start giving Jeremy Fears off the bench more of these minutes in the Michigan State backcourt, and we're going to have to go a different direction even from AJ Hoggard. Now, Tyson Walker did play well last night. He had 22 points, and if it wasn't for that, and then Malik Hall finally got himself going this season. He hit a couple of threes, had 18 last night, but there's still some major shooting concerns with the Spartans team. They were 6 for 19 last night which somehow matched that like 3x actually, I think, their season made threes total. I mean, they came in at like 2 for 30, whatever they were, and then go 6 for 19 last night, which astronomically increased their 3-point percentage for the season. But just 7 for 12 from the free throw line, still concerning. They turned it over 13 times, which in and of itself isn't great, but this was not a high possession game. So 13 turnovers in like a 67, 68 possession game, that's not great, especially again, like you're supposed to be winning games here if you're Coach Tom Izzo and the Spartans. You're supposed to be winning games with your backcourt. Like you have AJ Hogard, you have Jaden Atkins, you have Tyson Walker, who was he's a stinking All-American candidate going into the year. And I think it's fair if you're a fan of Michigan State to be a little worried about how things look right now in the season. And you have a few games coming up where like this, it's not going to, I don't want to say it's going to start to get away from them early in the year, but they play Butler. They're probably going to beat Butler, but Butler's proven to be much better offensively this year than we probably expected. They're going to get up and down the court a little bit. And like, there's a world where they score enough to make it tough for Michigan State. But then pretty soon, like Michigan State has to play on Thanksgiving. They play Arizona on a neutral site. Then they start conference play right away with Wisconsin. They play Baylor in about a month. So there's a few losses potentially. Like even if Michigan State starts playing well, like they could lose to Baylor, they could lose to Wisconsin, they could lose to Arizona, and now it's like you could be like 5-4 at Christmas and thinking like, man, I got to do something in Big Ten play here just to make sure I make the tournament. That this could end up being like a North Carolina situation last year where the Spartans bring a ton back from a good team. They're projected top 5 in the country, and then things just don't work out. And we're overreacting. We're getting all fired up, I guess, a little bit here with that take. I'm not going to put them on bubble watch as we sit here on November 15th, but there are some structural issues that I think Coach Izzo and Spartan and the Spartan faithful need to get figured out. But certainly credit to Duke. I think that as their guard play, if their guard play can get more to what we expected it to look like with veteran Jeremy Roach, with Tyrese Proctor playing at least like an all ACC guard, and then if you get something out of Jared McCain, we certainly saw what Caleb Foster is capable of last night in terms of shooting the ball. So if those guys can get to the level that we expected, then I think Duke is going to maintain top 5, top 10 status throughout the season. I think Kyle Filipowski's that good. I like Mark Mitchell in the front court and their pieces there. But those of you that are tuning in to watch me on this show, you probably want to hear what I have to say about the Kentucky Wildcats and the second game of last night's Champions Classic. So I've already been on Lexington Radio this morning to talk about this game. I have been on Twitter talking about it this morning. I'll have a full film breakdown at Ramsey KSR going throughout the afternoon, and then on KentuckySportsRadio.com, I'll have my Watch the Tape article up later this afternoon or this evening. So plenty of content already out there and coming about the Kansas-Kentucky game. But if you're listening to this, you're going to get it live and first. So big picture, positive for Kentucky. And actually, I want to start with this. And it was one of the last things I said on Twitter before I grabbed some lunch and then came here to go live for the show. Obviously, I live in a Kentucky Twitter bubble. Like I don't follow a bunch of Kansas fans and beat writers. I don't get Kansas basketball Twitter on my timeline. So it's not fair to say that they aren't getting the publicity they deserve. However, I have enough friends in college basketball media nationally, or I follow enough people nationally to know that coming out of last night, the discourse has almost all been about Kentucky. Certainly, I think nationally it's been very positive. Locally, it's been positive with pockets of like, okay, I'm tired of being told that we played well when we lost. We're Kentucky. Let's just win some darn games, which I fully understand that side of things. But I want to make sure that we give credit to Kansas. And, I know a lot of people, they don't like Hunter Dickinson and they have a negative view of Hunter Dickinson. It is what it is. That dude is an amazing college basketball player. You can say that he has a punchable face. You can say he's frustrating. You can say he's a little dirty. You can say he flops around. He sets illegal ball screens, all this kind of stuff. It is what it is. Dude had 27 and 21 while we were hanging all over him, triple teaming him in the post at times. This dude is awesome, and he is a perfect player for Coach Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks. He's so good in their system. He's such a great passer, great finisher inside. 10 for 11 from the free throw line. That was huge for the Jayhawks last night. Obviously hit that big three going into halftime, which got the Jayhawks some momentum, got them down 7 instead of being down 10 at the halftime break. DeJuan Harris, he flipped Kentucky's game plan on its head. If you read my scouting reports on Twitter and at KentuckySportsRadio.com, I talked about going under the ball screens. I showed a bunch of clips about why you go under the ball screens. I showed a bunch of clips of why or how you can be effective while going under the ball screens. The Kentucky staff also decided to go under the ball screens. And DeJuan Harris goes 5 for 5 from three-point range. Now, do you want to argue that you should adjust a little bit after he makes a couple? Yes, that's something I always write in my breakdowns. Like I always say, go under the ball screens. We'll not to worry about him shooting. We'll adjust if he makes a couple. That's usually how I word the scouting reports. Something to keep in mind, though. It's easy because enough fans, enough basketball bennies around Lexington, around Big Blue Madness are now. It's going to sound degrading, but most of them are smart enough now to recognize that we were going under the ball screens, or they just see the Twitter discourse and they know we're going under the ball screens. So then they see DeJuan Harris go 5 for 5, and they're like, Brandon Ramsey, you're an idiot. John Calipari, you're an idiot. Why would you go under the ball screens? This guy went 5 for 5. I told you that was a bad idea. Well, when you watch the film, he didn't go 5 for 5 shooting behind ball screens. In fact, only 2 of his 5 threes were actually behind ball screens, including only one of those second 2 that came late and kind of felt like the turning point to Kansas winning the game. So I'm not going to bash. I think it was the right decision. I told somebody on Twitter this morning, if we played Kansas again today, I would go under the ball screens on DeJuan Harris, and I would say, hey, man, go 5 for 5 again? Good luck. I think he'll go 1 for 5 the next time. But, again, that's why Kansas is number 1 in the country. That's why coaches lose sleep at night. That's why coaches lose their hair. That's why coaches have gray hair. Maybe why I got out of coaching after 5 years was that when you play really good teams like Kansas, there's not necessarily a good decision or even hardly a right decision. There's just lesser of two evil decisions. And Kentucky decided to go under the ball screens and help heavily off of DeJuan Harris and see if he could score enough to beat us. Well, he scored 18 points. Guess what? He's a really darn good player. He was an all Big 12 guy. He's the best. He's the defensive player of the year in the Big 12 last season. He's one of the best point guards in the country. Yeah, is it surprising he went 5 for 5 from 3? Obviously. Is it shocking that he was good enough to beat us on November 14th? No, it's not. He's like I said. I mean, he's one of the best point guards in the country. I said before the game, I thought as much discourse as there was about Hunter Dickinson and how he matched up with Kentucky, how Kentucky matched up with him. For all that discourse, I said before the game, I thought the battle in the backcourt was where the game would be won and lost. If the Wildcats guards could be better than the Jayhawks guards, I thought Kentucky would win the game. Well, I mean, obviously Rob Dillingham played very well. Antonio Reeves scored 24 points despite poor shooting night. Reed Shepherd was good in spurts. Got almost nothing out of DJ Wagner. But DeJuan Harris won the game. In a lot of ways, he was the best guard of the game. The one stretch for Rob Dillingham notwithstanding. But you have to give credit to Kansas in the way they played. And I think it's unfair to the Jayhawks if all you do coming out of this game is talk about how good Kentucky looked, because still it lost by 5 points. But to now do exactly that, let's talk about how good Kentucky looked, or how exactly did they look. After the game last night, watching it live, taking in, I'm on the KS board, message board during the game. I'm on Twitter during the game. I'm watching the game during the game. I felt really, really optimistic and pleased with how Kentucky played. Going into the game, I thought we would lose by about 10 points. I thought Kansas was somewhat clearly the better team going into the game. I felt that they were definitely the better team for about 4 minutes. In fact, I told my dad today that I almost posted something at that first TV timeout saying like this is not going to go well. Like I thought we were going to really struggle to score. Um, that we were sped up in those first 4 minutes or so. They were staying in front of the ball, and I thought it was going to be a real struggle to score when I didn't think that would be a major issue. Um, Quickly, at least once we put in Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham, scoring no longer became a problem, and it was a pretty quick turnaround. It was a very apparent turnaround once we got those guys in there, and for I don't if you at least a 20-minute stretch or so in the middle of the game, Kentucky was the better team. Kentucky had better players on the floor. Rob Dillingham was the best player on the floor. Reed Shepherd was playing at a very high level. And at that point, I thought, man, like this Kentucky team is special. We have dudes that can just go out and win a game. And I said it after our first exhibition game. I think Rob Dillingham could be the best basketball player on this Kentucky team. I stand by that. Certainly after what I saw against Kansas. Now, does he have his drawbacks? Yes, he got caught kind of going rogue defensively a few times. He had a couple excellent off-ball steals, but then also twice he got really, really cheap fouls while kind of gambling. And okay, he won a couple gambles, got a couple steals, lost a couple gambles, got a couple fouls, and throughout the game, some fans, some media members, etc., like there was some belly aching or complaining about Rob Dillingham playing 16 minutes, Reed Shepherd playing 16 minutes. Well, those guys in each half, respectively, both those guys got themselves in serious foul trouble. Reed Shepherd picked up his second foul in the first half with 8:50 to go, right after he nailed a couple threes. Rob Dillingham picks up his fourth foul with just over 10 minutes to go in the game. Well, like, sorry, guys, it's hard to, these are guys that were coming off the bench to begin the game anyway. Yes, in the first rotation, they pretty quickly proved, okay, like we need to play these guys as many minutes as possible. Could you have maybe found them 18 and 19 minutes instead of 16? Yeah, probably. And in a game like this, would that have maybe been the difference in the game? Yeah, who knows? Heck, Kentucky almost won the game anyway. But there's really not an argument to say like, well, Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham should have played 25 minutes last night. No, they shouldn't have. They were in foul trouble. What do you want them to do? Like especially Rob, and I said it with Severe Wheeler. I said it, all these different times. Like I get this from Bill Simmons, but he is a table test guy. If there ever was a table test guy, he's going to bring a heck of a lot to the table, but then he's going to every once in a while walk over and he's going to, pull the table cover off and the plates are going to go everywhere. And you're going to like, as long as he leaves more on the table than he takes off, you're going to want to play the guy as many minutes as you can. But there's going to be games where he makes some great plays defensively, but then fouls too much, or makes some great plays defensively and then gets himself out of position. There's going to be games. Heck, we saw it last night. Dude makes 4 threes. It felt like I was watching Reggie Miller there for a second, where dude makes 4 threes, assists on a fifth in like a 90-second, 120-second span. But then he has a couple pretty iffy pull-ups. He has the shot with whatever two. I got it right here. I wrote down Dilly insane shot, 12 on the shot clock, 2:17. You get that shot. Now, how do you coach that? Because you have to be really careful. Like you don't want to tell Rob Dillingham, don't go try to steal the ball from people, because he had 2 excellent off-ball steals that led to baskets. You don't want to tell Rob Dillingham, don't pick guys up full court. But then the one time he fouled a guy like 85 feet from the basket, that was his second foul. Dilly's second foul, 85 feet from the basket, 2:24 to go in the first half. Kansas made 2 free throws off of that. The second one of which was a Justin Edwards lane violation that gave him a third free throw. But like, you don't want to take away that aggressiveness on the offensive end. Dude makes 4 threes in 90 seconds. Then he takes a couple ill-advised ones. You don't want to tell him to not be aggressive, because then you don't get the 4 made ones. But you do have, you just have to keep kind of showing him on film of like, hey, I'm not telling you to not take this shot necessarily, but here's some of the other things you have. Or, especially that one, that he takes with 2:17. Like, time and score. It was 83-83 at that point. Um, yeah, it was 83-83 at that point. Obviously, 2.5 minutes to go. Like, we don't need a crazy, three between the leg dribble, step back, baseline shot with 12 seconds on the shot clock. Now, if you take that with 4 seconds, if you take it in rhythm in transition, like, I'm not gonna probably lose sleep over you taking that shot. I don't want to handcuff you and take that away from you. But again, show it on film. Talk about time and score. Talk about situations. Like, are you coming off a 5-0 run for Kansas? Maybe let's try to get a good one. Are you feeling the heck out of yourself like you were in the first half? Like I said, the most impressive play of that stretch, it wasn't the four made threes that Rob Dillingham made. It was the fifth one where it was as tailor made as possible. I mean, I would have shot the pull up three. When he was coming down the floor, left wing, couple dribbles into it, smack it. He would have taken his jersey off and ran around the arena. But no, he throws it ahead to Antonio Reeves. It's like, this is a freshman who clearly thinks highly of himself in a good way. Like, this guy is confident / cocky as possible. And he's talking crap to the fans in the first row, to the Kansas bench, everything. Like, this guy is at the height of feeling himself on this monster national stage. And he turned down a warranted heat check three to pass the ball to Antonio Reeves. Like, that's huge. But then, like, today in film, show him that, and then show him his shot at 217 and just say, Rob, like, these are two different people making these decisions here. And I just want you to know. Just want you to know. Take it in, process, and let's be better. Kentucky collapsed a little bit down the stretch. Like, it just is what it is. There were things that it was the first game of the season against New Mexico State. We had the halftime tweak. The tweak playing through Trey Mitchell. I've watched the film last night and today. In the first half, Kentucky made 3 threes directly from Trey Mitchell post feeds, getting the ball inside to Trey. Actually, all 3 of those in the first half, he hit a cutter. The cutter kicked it out, made 3. In the second half, we had a Trey Mitchell post feed right back out to Antonio Reeves, splash. So that 4 times we fed the post to Trey Mitchell, got the ball kicked back out. Because they were switching, because they weren't guarding him with Hunter Dickinson, Kansas had guys guarding out on the perimeter that weren't necessarily as comfortable in those positions. And I don't think Kentucky took full advantage of what turned in to be almost even more of a mismatch than we would have thought. Like, we thought Hunter Dickinson was going to have a hard time guarding Trey Mitchell. Well, it ended up being he wasn't guarding Trey Mitchell, which meant we should probably have even gone to him even more. And for whatever reason, especially down the stretch, we just didn't do that. We weren't really calling anything in those final 4 minutes. Like, Kentucky was winning the game, and it kind of turned into hero ball. And you can lay some blame at the players' feet, the coach's feet, whoever you want. But admittedly, the end of the game did not go well. That needs to be discussed. And like the Kentucky is too good offensively to have a stretch like what we saw late in the game. And they need to have a few things that when things are breaking down and when things aren't going well, here's what we go to right the ship. And in my opinion, that is always going to be getting touches in the, kind of in that 12 to 15 foot range, or flashing to the elbow, flashing to the top of the key, getting the ball to Trey Mitchell and letting things run through him. All right, we're reaching the 30-minute mark. That's about as long as I want these all fired up episodes to go. I can only be all fired up for so long, people. So thank you all so much for tuning in live here on YouTube for the second episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Make sure you subscribed here to the YouTube channel, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. Same deal, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts for Monday and Friday morning National College Basketball episodes. You can follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Find all of my written work at KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you share this, tell your friends about it, leave a like, leave a comment. I'll be tweeting it out on Twitter later as well. So if you're watching this not live, but later on in the day or tomorrow, thank you also for listening. And We will see you next Wednesday, same time, same place, 12:30. All fired up with Brandon Ramsey.